There we go. All right. So, and apparently, I also call it Civic Hack Night.
It's okay. It's got many names. What's the you're here?
But the project in 2013, summer 2013, is Englewood Codes. We can do the next slide. So what I want to go over briefly, not too much longer, it's just the general idea behind Englewood Codes, what it took to get it done this summer. We're in our last week. We have 2 days left. And so what it took to do that this summer, what we accomplished, what we learned, and also what's next, right? And so for the next slide, we the general idea is this. I believe, and my organization believes, right, that the best way for this city to stay competitive in this new economy is not only to attract the best tech talent to our city with a Lollapalooza Tech Fest, right, but to really grow the talent in the neighborhoods, resident talent that's lived here that likely won't leave, that has a commitment to the city, that doesn't have to be lured, it just has to be developed, right here in Chicago. So we believe that if Chicago can grow a broad base of tech talent that reflects the city across the entire city, I think we'd be in a very good position moving into the new economy. I watched, just the little bit of time that I spent working at a web firm, I saw folks being poached by New York and Silicon Valley from small web firms here in the city. And I hear that story over and over again. I'm not an expert on labor markets, particularly the tech world, but I have enough anecdotal evidence to make me concerned that we need to start growing talent. Because it's hard to compete with New York, it's hard to compete with San Francisco. We can play that game, and we can be growing our own talent and be that magnet for talent from all across the world. On the next slide, I'm going to go into, and this is me saying the same thing in front of Ronnie Manuel. And he's kind of smiling, right? He's like, who is this guy? Right. So on the next slide, we have what it took. As I was trying to say, how do I describe all the different stakeholders and people who made this happen? Again, I talked about the Smart Communities program, so that's the whole basis of this, right? That's the basis of my salary, is how I can exist in the neighborhood, is how I can even talk about technology exclusively, and nobody's saying, why aren't you talking about safety? Why aren't you talking, right? So it took 2 years of the Smart Communities program to say, hey, technology plays a role in building neighborhoods and building communities. It took Bush Chicago, who wrote that grant that was able to pay my salary to keep me there. And I'm talking about grants and stuff, but this is just the way it works, right? And to say technology has a role to play in the neighborhoods, right? It took Liz to connect with the World Business Chicago and this idea of Seed Chicago, which was going to have this curated Chicago page for Kickstarter projects. And so we were already going to do something in summer 2013. So when Liz, who I've been hammering, saying, hey, you have all this, like this big pot of money, or so I think, right? I think Liz has like this pot of gold sitting in their basement or something. And I'm like, why don't you like give me some resources, buy some computers so I can just teach some students how to code, so we can show that there's talent in the neighborhoods and we just need to develop them. And so after, I guess, hearing me say, like, ask it after like a few months, they connected us to World Business Chicago, who had reached out to us saying, we need local projects to feature, right, on our curated Kickstarter page. And so that's how we got connected to World Business Chicago. The city of Chicago has all the while, for the Department of Innovation and Technology, been a strong ally playing some like inside game kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. I'll get to that in a minute. Then of course, After School Matters, which funded our 2011 program, and we brought to the table again in 2013. What After School Matters provides is resources for an additional instructor, in addition to myself, right? But also stipends for youth, right? Because we don't have bus cars to give the students. So they can get this stipend they can like get to in front of the program, maybe buy a candy bar or something, right? So it's just like a very modest stipend. It's not even worth really talking about, but it's modest. The students appreciate it. So we're able to handle that. They also help us buy supplies, right? So all these different stakeholders. And of course, city colleges provided the space for us to host our project. We had 25 youth. We were aiming for 30. We settled at 25 because their labs are, maximum capacity is 24. Instead of having the original plan of 2 groups of 15 cycling in and out of a computer lab, half the day spent on leadership, half the day spent on code, we spent like 2/3 of the day on code, 1/3 of the day on leadership, right? And that was a decision that the students made. We want to code more. I'm like, oh, okay. We're going to have to kick something out. But city colleges provided that space free of charge. They gave me what it would have cost, which made me make a bunch of calls to the Department of Innovation and Technology. And it's expensive, right? But they gave us their premier smart lab. And you're going to see a picture of it in a minute. And so it took some other things on the slide, on the next one. It took 178 project backers who participated and supported our Kickstarter. We set an initial goal of raising $5,500 to buy supplies and equipment for 15 teams. And a few people got their hands on it. I think Derek sent a tweet like Saturday morning, and like 3 hours later, it was fully funded, right? So that was like our that was our 4th day of Kickstarter. We had like 41 days left. So I was like, what do we do with these 41 days? Let's double the goal, right? And let's go for 30 students, right? Which was more about like just unbridled passion and zeal, and it wasn't really well thought out, if I can admit that. I was like, oh, let's just double the number of students, right? Endless complications and just doubling the number of students in a project where you're teaching students how to code, right? But on the next slide.